said something really interesting, Michael, which was the idea that things can work in the lab, but not necessarily work in the patient. And again, I'll go right back to you, Mark, and talk a little bit about what you're hearing on the therapeutic side, things that potentially are working in the lab, but we have yet to potentially see efficacy or benefit in the patient. So I'm talking first around therapeutics and drugs that we potentially could be used to treat COVID-19 patients, and then maybe even on the vaccine side. So what are you hearing there?
Okay. Since you introduced the topic the way you did, I want to tie those two thoughts together, which really what we're all discussing right now is the difference between in vitro data, so in a test tube in the lab, versus in vivo data, so that would be in a living organism. And in fact, that living organism, that in vivo, we might even want to take it one step further and say, it might work in certain animal models, but maybe not humans. And so you can even start to parse that out a little bit more. I wanted to start that out because a very topical medication that people are hearing a lot of information about right now is remdesivir. So remdesivir is one of our nucleoside analog prodrugs. It's basically an antiviral type drug. It does have an inhibitory effect on pathogenic animal and human coronaviruses. So an inhibitory effect on pathogenic animal and human coronaviruses, which includes the SARS-CoV-2 in vitro. So that's what I want to highlight, is all of that information is in vitro. In other words, from lab data, we think that it can be effective. It does inhibit the Middle East respiratory syndrome coronavirus, SARS-CoV-1, SARS-CoV-2, replication in animal models. So again, not necessarily humans, but in animal models. And so one of the challenges that we've had just of late is this publication that came out of the Lancet, a fairly well done study, which obviously has gained a lot of publicity. I was almost going to say notoriety, but I'd rather say publicity, that although not statistically significant, patients that did receive this remdesivir did have a numerically faster time to clinical improvement than those who didn't get the drug. In other words, those who received placebo. And so there's a lot of chatter right now that this remdesivir may in fact be a treatment of choice for the treatment of coronavirus. And again, it's really not based on good data. It's based on in vitro data, and it's based on in vivo animal data, but not necessarily borne out truly in humans. And certainly, if to be blunt, what did the study show? Well, if you had a symptom duration of 10 days or less and you were given remdesivir, the idea was that you typically had recovery in 11 days versus 15 days. Again, numerically interesting, but is this something we really want to hang our hat on? I will tell you, as of right now, where are we? May the 6th, 2020. We do not currently have a treatment, a pharmaceutical treatment for the management of COVID disease. And because of all of the work that's being done right now in this particular area of therapeutics, the idea that remdesivir is something that we want to really pursue has been highlighted by the fact that this drug, which has only been available through clinical trials, has actually been granted emergency use authorization by the Food and Drug Administration. Now, it is being still restricted to the treatment of only severe hospitalized COVID-19 patients, typically those on ventilators. Gilead, the company that produces this medication, has donated 1.5 million vials of the drug and is working with the federal government to distribute it to these patients in need. To give you a sense of what that is, the treatment course with this drug is usually 5 to 10 days. And so that's about 140,000 courses. I'm not sure if you think that that's a drop in the bucket or, at least a good start, but that's where we are today. Now, this is some of the most recent information, because it was just released this morning that Gilead has also established an expanded access clinical trial program for this. And they've also designated a specialty pharmacy that's going to be ASD Healthcare, which is a subsidiary of AmerisourceBergen, to distribute the drug. And so if hospitals have these patients, this is not the time to call AmerisourceBergen and say, we need to get our hands on these drugs, because the U.S. government has actually already decided which health systems will receive the donated product based on case level data. So, we've had a surveillance system out there that's been tracked by the federal government, and that's where the dispersion of these medications will come from. You know, it's very interesting, but you know, it harkens back to almost 2-3 weeks ago, where there was some significant interest in the idea of hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine. And you know, I started off my answer telling you that as of today, we still do not have an effective therapy in the treatment of this. So there's more to come. Now, you shouldn't have got me started talking, because I will take the opportunity. I don't normally call out, you know, individual organizations other than, you know, the CDC, the FDA, NIOSH, OSHA, but there is an organization that puts out the medical letter. And so it's available at medicalletter.org. I don't work for this company or, you know, take any remuneration or anything. But the reason I wanted to call it out is because this morning they released a report specifically around this, taking a look at, you know, what therapies are currently being investigated for the treatment of COVID. And so that 26-page report, which normally you would have to subscribe to the medical letter to get access to it, contains such important information, non-biased, non-pharmacy sponsored, that they've made it available to the general public. And so rather than try to, you know, give you a very prolonged answer, I would direct your listeners to, again, medical letter, all one word, medicalletter.org. Now, if I was asked to sort of summarize what this 26-page document says, and again, released this morning, so it's as up to date as we are today. Essentially, most authorities recommend the use of these drugs only in the setting of a clinical trial. So they're being investigated, but they're certainly not ready for prime time. And that definitely goes for, you know, drugs like hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine, even the antibiotic azithromycin, which we know as Zithromax. You were asking me with this question, you know, where are we today? Well, there's at least 18 drugs under current investigation, to include over 70 vaccines that are currently being investigated. But we don't yet have that panacea. And so, again, I think it's important to recognize that a lot of work is being done in this area. And hopefully it will lead to an appropriate treatment, but we just do not have that today.
Yeah,
Can I put you on the spot here, Mark, a little bit, take it one step further?
Yeah.
Do you think we're ever going to be in a position that if you believe you have been exposed to COVID, there could be some kind of prophylactic medication that you could take?
Yeah, great question, Michael. And I guess, you know, we're going to have to see how this plays out. I like what you said at the beginning, the idea that, again, in the lay public, we talk a lot about coronavirus, and everybody thinks that there's one, but actually there's many variants. Some are more virulent than others, but, you know, this is a family of viruses. And of course, you know, viruses are prone to mutate. So we'll have to sort of follow the course of this particular pandemic. It may turn out to be very similar to the seasonal flu. You know, every August, September, October, we're all encouraged to get our flu shot for the year, and we repeat that annually to try to you know, mitigate the opportunity for the flu and influenza to kind of, you know, to take a stronghold. And so it wouldn't surprise me if over time we develop a successful vaccine for this coronavirus. And again, maybe it turns out to be when you get your annual flu vaccine, you also get your annual corona vaccine. Or as you know, my partners in the industry will probably develop a penta vaccine or a quad vaccine or something where you get everything you need in one shot. The alternate, I mean, if I was to take the more gloomy approach, if this turns out to be much more virulent than we're expecting, in that case, you're starting to look at a vaccine that's going to require significant boosters. And depending on how this vaccine mutates in the future, you know, we may have to be looking at not only boosters, but a change in the formulation for that vaccine moving forward, which means that the ongoing research, development, and ultimately clinical trials for this is going to be with us for a very, very long time. I want to take the you know, the bright side here, but there's still so many unknowns right now.
So one quick follow-up, Mark, remdesivir, I'm going to say that wrong, I'm sure, but that's an IV drug, right? That's a hospital-based drug.
Yeah, thank you for stopping me there, because I've already seen in the chat box a couple questions. So a couple quick things. First of all, remdesivir is only available as an intravenous drug, which means unlike chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, earlier medications that were purported to be useful in the abatement of COVID, you know, this is not an oral medication that you're going to go out and have filled at your corner pharmacy. It really is only for hospital use, and currently being very, very restricted or prescribed in who's getting exposed to it. The second piece from the question submitted is, right now the Lancet trial was comparing 5-day and 10-day treatment courses in the patients that were shown to be responsive. And there wasn't a significant clinical differentiation between the 5 and the 10-day course. So what I'm trying to say is, you know, most people should probably be getting the 5-day course. Those may perhaps more severe or slow to respond might get a 10-day course. Current cost, and because this is not currently available, this is just information that you know, has been passed on verbally from the organization, initially being donated, of course, underneath the emergency use and clinical trial protocols. But it's estimated that a 5-day course is going to be somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000.